Welcome to the K-State Insiders, your Kansas State sports show. Now, let's head into the studio.
Welcome to the Insiders. I'm Fitz, and you can see the rest of the crew right there. Carmody, Brien Hanley, and our guest this week is Missy Heidrick, Missy Decker Heidrick to me. You always be the left-hander, Decker. Of course, she played basketball at Kansas State and is now a basketball analyst. Be bopping all over the country, doing little hoops, men's and women's. Missy, just update us on that. How is that endeavor going, and are you enjoying it?
It's really good, and it's so a pleasure to be here with you guys. So happy to do this. It's great. I love the basketball season because I'm incredibly busy, and I have the ability to be able to do that. So very fortunate to work with Brian Smoller and be part of the ESPN Plus broadcasts in Manhattan for K-State. But I also go and do other leagues, Ohio Valley. I do a lot of work in the Summit League. I actually leave tomorrow. I go to Omaha. I have a game for them on the CBS Sports Network. The Omaha men are hosting Kansas City. So the Roos will be in town in Omaha, and that is on Wednesday night. So I'm looking forward to that. So that, along with a lot of other endeavors, it keeps me incredibly busy and trying to tell the stories and continue to elevate both men's and women's basketball across the country.
Are you going to be able to get to Omaha?
Yes, I can get to Omaha, especially starting tomorrow. Things looking a lot better in Kansas City. And apparently it's clear there. Like, there was nothing that happened up that direction. So feeling very fortunate about that. But I figure at some point tomorrow I will head north. And who would have thought it'd be clearer north than it would be here?
I'm not the one to ask about the weather. I haven't left the house.
That's okay.
I opened the door for the dogs to come and go, and that's about it. We're going to focus mostly on basketball. We'll get into a little of the transfer portal a little bit later in the show, but let's start with the good news. Cole, the women's basketball program is just chugging away. They're on their Utah trip. They play at Utah tomorrow night and BYU, I believe, on Saturday. The men will do that in reverse, I believe, a little bit later in the season. It's kind of cool. That's how travel partners work. You don't actually travel as partners. People come to see you as travel partners. So that's kind of cool. But 15-1, I didn't see the rankings today. I got to be honest. They were at 12. Missy, did they move?
No.
Didn't? Okay. But Cole, they're cooking, and they're deeper than they were last year.
Yeah, I first of all, let me say that they're better than the 12th ranked team in the country. Unfortunately for those gals, there's not a lot of teams that are losing in front of them. And if you remember back to last year, K-State got up to number 2 in the country, and that was because there were some teams that were getting beat. Was K-State good enough to be number 2 in the country at one point last year? I would say, yeah. Obviously, the injury to Ayoka Lee really hurt them last season, but this season, she's back healthy. Jeff Mitty's doing a really good job of load management with her. Who would have thought that's something we would have said in college basketball, but he's picking and choosing his spots to play her. And she's added this fadeaway jumper that I don't think I've seen in her arsenal, which is really quite impressive. But they're incredibly deep fits, and they're so fun to watch because even when they're not playing that good, somebody picks up the team. I think that's what makes them so good, is that they're not reliant on Yoki. Maybe as they have been in the past, they're able to kind of spread the ball around, and the emergence of Taryn Sides turning into essentially the best 3-point shooting guard in the country is just, it's a remarkable story, the Kansas native. So I've watched every single game. I'm locked in on these girls. They've done an outstanding job, and BYU and Utah are going to be really tough because BYU gave them some trouble last year, and Utah just beat Iowa State, and they entered the top 25 today. So those are going to be some tough games, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how the rest of the season plays out.
Missy, flesh out a little bit better how this team differs from the team that did get so highly ranked last year, and then with Ayoka's injury kind of fizzled at the end, losing at home to Colorado. How's this team different?
I think that it goes back to the depth scenario, that's something that I don't think they necessarily had. A season ago when Lee came out of the game, whether that was foul trouble, planned, etc., there was a drop off. And then there were 7 games of which she was unavailable because she was injured. And there really wasn't another true post option. You didn't have that. And so the system of which you're running, which is 4 out, 1 in, you're setting the pick and roll, you're trying to get her deep, you're burying people down low. Well, when you take that out, now all of a sudden, what do you do? And I think that's where the disconnect was a season ago. Also, I think you have an emergence of more depth in the guard play. And I say that because a lot of people are like, well, shouldn't Serena Sundell play 35, 37, 39 minutes? Actually, if she doesn't, you're better off. And the fact that you have Ziana Walker, and you've got Taryn Sides, who's come in off the bench in every game. I don't think she's ever going to be in the starting lineup unless there's a reason for that. But Walker, to me, is probably that X factor. Does 2 things. Number one, she's turned herself into a high-level defender, gives you another engine out front, sort of that motor at that point position. And on the offensive end of the floor, you take the ball out of Sundell's hand more often, and you allow her to move to that 2 spot, and she can play off the ball. Serena Sundell's not a great 3-point shooter, and I can tell you right now, it's probably not going to get a whole lot better throughout the course of the season. She doesn't have to be. Her consistency and her numbers and what she does with the basketball outside of the 3-point shot, that's what she has to do. And if she doesn't have to handle it on every possession and be the person taking the beating on full court ball pressure every game, 94 feet for 40 minutes, that wears you out. And so in order to be able to alleviate some of that, I think Walker's a big piece of that. So I just think the depth is a different story. And, in everyone that I've talked to across the country, in every top 25, every Big 12 preview I've done this season, I will tell you it is the number one question. And it is really the thing. As Ayoka Lee goes, this team goes. She's got to stay healthy. She's got to stay on the floor. And I think you're going to see those minutes go up as necessary. And that's going to really be game by game and matchup by matchup.
Big B last game out against Texas Tech, Ayoka played 17 minutes, scored 19 points with 8 rebounds. It was ridiculous. We can criticize. We could discuss her conditioning, any human at her size trying to get up and down the court is going to wear you out. But I like how they've trimmed down her stress load, her workload. But her fundamentals are so elite for a post player that, look, people want to talk about the differences between the men's and women's game. Fine, you can do that. But I would take any male post, and if I wanted to show them film about the fundamentals you need to have to survive, I would show them her.
Yeah.
She keeps the ball high. She keeps it away. She's now got the fadeaway. She's always been good with either hand. She has worked on her skill set to an elite level.
I think I mean, I would say it's always been the footwork and it's been the hands. And she had that from the beginning. And so when you have that capacity to be able to do that, and then at her size, handle the physicality, you learn the physicality of the game as you go. But for her, I think that's one of the things. And people don't understand how good she's gotten at getting to her space. Now, the teams in the games she struggled, or where K-State has struggled, where she doesn't get that deep, bury you in the post down by the low block, that's more difficult. That's the scouting report if I had to write one. You got to meet her high in the lane. Don't let her get deep. But she is absolutely a fantastic example of how to turn and bury somebody and get position.
Yep, Big B. She beat you before she even has the ball in her hands.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about it is, look, she understands how to play basketball. And that's the one thing about it is, like, look, when you're not the most athletic person out there, you got to figure out ways how to be effective. She's figured it out, and figured it out a while back. She didn't just figure it out now. That's not something that you're just going to come up with all of a sudden in a summer or something like that. She understands how to play. Look, I'm not the most athletic. I know how to get position. But not only when I get the position, I know what to do. I know how, okay, I'll turn over right shoulder, left shoulder. If you defend either one, I have a counter to all of that. And that's where the difference, and she can pass out of it. Now, you look at her numbers, she's not necessarily doesn't have the highest assist numbers out there, but she doesn't have to, because once she makes moves, she scores. And that's the difference, It's not that she can't pass or isn't even a willing passer. It's okay, well, I'm at 2 feet. Why am I going to pass it out if I make a move and I can score? I just do that. It seems simple, and I'm making it sound like it's very simplistic, but it isn't. But just the way she does it, it's a thing of beauty, in my opinion, because, like I said, Missy's right. She gets you deep. She pins you. You can't get around her once she gets it down there, and it's literally over. And I don't want to say it's easy for the guards to get her the ball, but it's easy for the guards to get her the ball when she gets that position. It's unbelievable what she does. I love how she plays basketball, Fitz, and you're 100% right. The fundamentals of the game, that's what the men's game is missing.
Mhm.
She knows how to be fundamental with the basketball. And like I said, she is a basketball player. And there's a huge difference between being an athlete and being a basketball player. And she's effective because she's a very, very good basketball player.
And Missy Tamira Poindexter,
Yes.
that's just something they didn't have. She's a 6'2" athlete, can make things happen, can shoot it, can get to the rim.
Mhm.
That's, for me, the younger players like Sides and Walker stepping up into bigger roles. That's important, but bringing in that piece and also a true backup post
Mhm.
have made this team so much more solid. You can't just say we're going to take away Lee and we're going to win. If Lee's injured, they're not as good. I'm not sure that's true anymore.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Poindexter has been an incredibly bright surprise. Now she comes in, she was the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year at Tulsa last season. But you guys, we all know this. We're watching college sports every day. You know that sometimes the mid-major to the Power Four universe, that transition doesn't always happen seamlessly. Now, if the expectation was that she was going to average 20 some a game like she did at Tulsa, then I don't think that's not the correct expectation. But understanding what her role is and understanding what she needs to do for this team, I think she's embraced that. And I think her size and her length and that athleticism defensively, this is a group that's hanging their hat on their defense. You know, we're watching them score points and they're beating people, and I'm seeing a margin of, over 30 plus a game throughout the course of the year, but it's because of the defense. And so you have to figure out a way to stop people. And if you can do that with length and size out front and generate offense with your defense simplistically, then it makes it a lot easier. And Poindexter absolutely is a big part of that added layer, I think, of what this team's been able to do.
Agreed. As we kind of transition now into the men, though, I'll be interested to see if the men continue to struggle, how much attention from the fan base kind of shifts over to the women. We haven't really seen that yet. We've seen growing interest, but still had great crowd for that Cincinnati game. And I think, judging from the feedback I got, most people were still engaged with the TCU game, but the women might start taking over the hearts and minds here.
Yeah, I think we kind of saw some of that last year too. It was absolutely incredible environment for the NCAA tournament in Bramlage Coliseum last year. That was really cool. Got to cover that. It was a blast. The Big 12 tournament, I think it has as much to do with the women's game continuing to grow as much as it does just K-State being good. And the fact that those two things are kind of coinciding at the same time, I think it's really piqued fan interest. But I agree. I think, as it pertains to the men, this is a really important game tomorrow for them, because if they win that game, you're 1-1 on the road trip. And I think a lot of people can kind of forgive you for the way that you closed TCU. I shouldn't say a lot of people. I should say some fans will kind of forgive you for how they finished the game against TCU. If you can go 1-1 in 2 back-to-back road games with a span of 2 days in between, I don't care who you're playing in the Big 12. That's solid. And so I think that, if they can find a way to be 2-1 after 3 conference games, after the way they looked the last 3 non-conference games, I think anybody would have signed up for that as it pertains to this basketball team.
Brian, I feel like K-State basketball fans are having that prolonged bad day, where everything's kind of piled up on you, and then something as small as your pen rolls off the desk and hits the floor, and you just have a meltdown. That, to me, was the TCU game.
It was.
If you go back and look 2 games prior, this same team was playing awful basketball and getting blown out by a very mediocre Wichita State team. And on the next time they hit the road, yeah, they blew it. They cost themselves a victory. They had an uneven performance, but it was so much better than it had been, and people still couldn't see that progress. All they saw was the L. And I'm telling you, this team's better. I don't know, good enough, but that was a much better showing, even though they literally choked that one away.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it was the effort. If they'd have given that kind of effort against Wichita State, they win the game.
Right.
The thing at TCU, look, in basketball, it's a make or miss game, and they just didn't make any shots. They couldn't buy a basket. If they just shoot 40%, they win the game by 10 points. Just think about that. They just couldn't make a shot. They were getting shots. They were playing hard. They guarded TCU, but sometimes you get discouraged when you're not making shots and you let it affect their defense. They didn't do that, and that was the thing that was encouraging. Now, the problem is that what you mentioned, Fitz, is a couple of games, St. John's, Wichita State. I don't know how bad St. John's is. I don't think they're great, but Wichita State isn't. No. And we just didn't give enough effort in those games. And so it's tough when, okay, yeah, great. You didn't make any shots. You still lost the game. So where am I supposed to see the silver lining in all of this? The problem is if you win the game against Wichita State, maybe even you win the game against Drake, which I think Drake is a lot better than Wichita State. If you win that game, and you had every opportunity to do that, okay, then it's, hey, you know what? I get it. You lose a game on the road because you don't make any shots. That happens to every basketball team in America.
Right.
But it's the compounding of all of that where it's, well, you didn't play hard against Wichita State. You let one get away against Drake. You get blown out in the second half by St. John's. And then you go on the road and you don't win because you don't make any shots. The culmination, fans are just, I get it. I mean, they're like, well, is this team really that invested? Now you go against Oklahoma State. This is way too early for a must-win game. K-State's got to win the game.
Yeah.
They have to win this game because you start looking at the schedule. Where you see a bunch of road wins at on this schedule, man, it's brutal. And I'm not saying they can't, but we all got to be realistic. So you have to win this game if you're going to give yourself a chance to compete in this league this year.
Missy, for most of this season, K-State offensively has come down the floor, gone to their spots, and it looked like they stood there and said, now what? Let's just stand here and maybe we can figure it out. Against Cincinnati, the home win, and for good chunks of that TCU game, I think in the middle of the first half, they let down. There's so much more motion on the offensive end now. They're not running anything different. They're just doing what they're doing with, I want to say it, with effort, with enthusiasm. And it breaks down defenses. And we can get to Coleman Hawkins in a little bit, but he has asserted himself on the offensive end, which is what this team needed. They've looked so much better. And even in the wake of not hitting shots against TCU, the shots were still good shots. They weren't rushing up shots at the end. They just look so much more enlightened on the offensive end of the floor.
Well, I think you have to break it down. I mean, it can be incredibly simple in this game is that you've got to get stops and you got to make shots. They were doing a good portion of the getting the stop side against TCU. It was the not making shots. I will absolutely agree with you, Fitz. I think they're in the games that I saw early in the year in the non-conference, there was a lot of standing. And you have to remember, when you stand in the game of basketball, you are incredibly easy to guard. You are playing right in to a simple scouting report of whoever your opponent is. Motion, setting screens, doing it with a purpose, making sure that cut is made for a reason. Don't just curl cut to want the basketball. Set a screen and roll hard and pin your guy and call for the ball. Those are things that I think the evolution has been. Now, whether it was the break, whether it was coming off the loss to Wichita State, they go home, whatever it is, you got to do what you got to do. And then you come back and you got to open up conference play and you want to get off on a good foot and a good note. They did that at home. They had that energy and that sense of urgency. I think that's what you're going to have to see from now on. And it's crazy to say that on January 6th forward, every day, every game has to be played with that sense of urgency. But there is a very, very fine, thin line of error and margin here.
Yep.
And that everything that they now do has to be with the intent that you got to figure out a way to get it done. I'm a firm believer also that whether it's women's basketball or men's basketball in the Big 12, you got to hold home court and you got to steal a couple on the road if you're going to give yourself a chance when it all comes down at the end February, early March. Well, they let one slide on Saturday. That was the one you got to steal. I got to say, we got to have that one. So I agree with all of you. I think tomorrow's must win, and there's really not a lot else you can say about it. They got to figure some things out as a unit so they can be better for 40 minutes.
And Cole, she's right. I mean, the fact that when you look around this conference, they're not a bunch of road games you can win just laying around. Not for a team that's playing like Kansas State. Maybe if you're Houston or Kansas or whomever's playing at a really elite level, Kansas isn't even right now, maybe there's more winnable games, but TCU is one of them. And certainly, without a doubt, Oklahoma State might be the most winnable road game you have this year. They got to get this one. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. in Stillwater, they've got to win.
They do. And Missy brought up a great point, and it takes me back to a saying. I follow Major League Baseball quite regularly, and there's a saying that goes in baseball, there's 50 games you're going to win easily, and then there's 50 games that you're going to lose easily. So what do you do with the next 62? And if you want to put that into college basketball perspective, that game against TCU felt like the next 62. And so, I don't know how the rest of the season is going to turn out. But if this team comes up a game or two shy of being where they want to be at the end of the season, this might be a game where you go back and you look at. But I think, Fitz, you brought up a great point with Oklahoma State, because this is a different team than TCU. Jamie Dixon's teams always play tough. They might not be very good, but they always play tough. And that team just didn't give up. Now, they didn't play particularly well in the first half. And as a matter of fact, I thought K-State was a better team in the first half, besides the not making shots part. But TCU, they got down and they said, you know what? We're not going to go away, and found a way to scratch and come back and get a victory. Well, this is now you're heading into Stillwater against a team with a first-year head coach. And Ryan Gilbert and Clint Stewart talked about it on the Friday walkthrough. What do you do against a first-year coach? Who has the advantage here? And that's another interesting kind of factor to look at, because I don't think Oklahoma State's the most talented team. Is this going to be a game where the coaching staff circles and finds a way to take advantage of maybe a younger coaching staff? I don't know, but it'll be an interesting game, because this Oklahoma State team, you're right, this is the most winnable road game on the schedule.
And Brian, Coleman Hawkins is awake and playing some really good basketball. He is finally looking like the guy that K-State paid a lot of money to come in and play for this season. And then he was just so casual, which has been his nature. But Jerome Tang it took a long time to get him to understand, you're not an accompanying player here. You're the guy. Yeah. We need you to score. We need you to assert yourself. And yes, you are a great passer, but that can't be the emphasis of your game. If you're having a really horrible offensive game, yes, but for the most part, we need the ball in your hands to score and then to pass. And I think he's finally caught on, and I think it's made a world of difference.
Well, it takes a minute. He played at Illinois. I mean, the guy was a lottery pick that was on his team. He had really good players that was on his team in Illinois, and he was a complimentary piece. Not to say he wasn't good. He was, but he wasn't the guy. And sometimes it takes you a minute, and that's at any level of basketball. It takes you a minute to be a complimentary piece and then be the guy. And especially when you move schools and things are different, I understand, but you're right. He's starting to come around, and you can see it really at TCU. I mean, he was out there. He was being ultra aggressive. And I think, and me and you have talked about it before, Fitz, if K-State's going to be anything, I've said it, the best players have to be the best players. And Coleman Hawkins is one of the best players, if not the best player. And you got to play like it. And he did. He was being aggressive. He was attacking. He was, basically feeding guys. I mean, he was doing all the things that you want your best player to do out there on the court. And it almost got it home. It's just didn't make a ton of shots, but you can live with not making shots because sometimes you're just not going to make a bunch of shots. But it's when you go 3 for 6, that's a problem. You can't your best player can't have 6 shots. That's where the issue is. Now, 6 for 15, you don't like it, but you know what? He took 15 shots because that makes everybody else better when he's shooting the basketball. I know that sounds weird, but it's the truth. When your guy's being aggressive like that, because he is such a great passer, teams are going to have to respect that, and other guys are going to get open. So he's doing a good job lately. He's got to continue to do it. But from here until the end of the season, he's got to have his foot on the gas pedal offensively for K-State to be effective.
And Missy, I see Coleman Hawkins now understanding where those shots come from. Where are his most effective ways to score? I think he still needs to work on that runner a little bit. It's one of those shots he likes to take more than make. I mean, but he's beginning to grasp that. He can back people down. He can take them to the rim. And if they don't come out and address him at the 3-point line, he'll cut it loose. And he's had some great effect. But I feel like now he's like, oh, I am the main guy. I need to be the main guy. But most importantly to me, I can be that guy. I can show the way for the rest of this team.
Well, I think that's obviously probably had to be one of the selling points of why Coleman Hawkins wanted to come to Kansas State, was that he was going to have a chance to be the marquee player that was going to be featured within what this system was. But I think it goes back to what we were talking about just a moment ago. It's got to be offense with a purpose. And I think early in the season, you're just kind of floating around trying to find things, trying to figure it out. But I think now you're seeing him in being more assertive in finding shots and finding ways to score. I think the other thing also, and this goes back to sort of the unit, and I don't believe, my personal opinion, I don't think there's one guy on here that's going to carry the load. I think this is by committee for the most part in every game that they're going to be in. However, Coleman Hawkins creates some serious matchup problems with opponents, and you have to recognize that. So that could be simply on a big little switch. That could have been just on one substitution where they bring a guy out for 2 minutes to get a breather. And now all of a sudden he's got the 6'4" guy on him because they think they're going to pull him out and he's out of the perimeter. He's got to have the basketball. So some of this, as we were talking about earlier with the women's team and guards understanding, you got to get the ball to Ayoka Lee when she's got position, give it to a place where she can operate. I think some of this also has to be the other guys on the floor. We've got to work together to make sure that our key offensive threats get the ball when they need it, when they have the matchup right, and where they can operate. Don't put them in a bad spot.
Agreed. Cole, let's talk about Doug. Jerome Tang got himself lost in an answer about why he played Doug against Cincinnati. I started him. He went down a road, got lost on that road, ended up in the ditch, came back out. I knew what he was saying. I think a lot of people misunderstood what he was saying. God did not tell him to start Doug. God told him to accept the flaws as he accepts in Jerome.
Right. Correct.
That was the point. I don't necessarily agree with that as a basketball coach, but it worked. Damn it! He put Doug McDaniel in the starting lineup, and he produced. He wasn't as good at TCU, wasn't as effective, particularly in the first half, but came to life in the second. I said this early on in a daily delivery. If K-State wants to be good, if K-State just wants to be competitive, Coleman Hawkins and Doug McDaniel need to say, "This is our team. Get out of our way. Everyone, we're going to get you the ball when we need to, but we are going to be Keontae and Marquise. We're different, but we're the guys that are going to carry it." And I think it's worked, but Doug McDaniel hasn't necessarily earned the time on the floor with everything I'm told about what goes on in practice or not in practice or other things. And yet the talent is undeniable. As a coach yourself, that's hard to sort out. When a kid doesn't do things right, but he's so good, you got to play him. Yep. I understand what Jerome Tang was going through.
You know what? It tracks though, right? Because anytime you have kids like that, and this is true at any level, any sport, all coaches who are listening to this know exactly what I'm about to say. The kids who are the most talented are the ones who can sometimes be the most inconsistent. And right now, that's what we're seeing with Doug McDaniel. And there are times where he looks like he is an first team all Big 12 point guard. And then there are times where he looks like, oh my God, get him off the court. And I mean, if he can find a way to be somewhere in the middle, Jerome Tang talks about consistency. I've heard him say multiple times, if you're a 20-point a night kind of guy, then I expect you to give me 20 points a night. But if you're a guy who's going to come into the game, play 15 minutes, get 5 points, grab 6 rebounds, and have 2 assists, then that's what I want. And right now, I don't really know what to expect with Doug McDaniel. I think I do. Guys, I've seen him play 3 really good halves, 2 halves against Cincinnati and 1 half against TCU. Other than that, I haven't seen much from him. However, the talent is undeniable. And I think if K-State wants to win games, they need to continue to ride the Doug McDaniel wave, because as he goes is going to be how this team goes. And I've been just like you and Big B. We've been sitting here banging our fists on the table, claiming for Doug McDaniel and Coleman Hawkins to step up. And that right now they're the 2 best players. And I think they are the 2 most talented. They're the 2 best right now. And if K-State wants to win, those 2 guys have to continue to be the 2 best players. I'm of the belief that Doug McDaniel will figure it out. It's going to take some time. Let's remember, he's only a junior. It's going to take some time. He's going to figure it out. It's just taken a little bit longer than I think everyone, especially Jerome Tang, would have hoped.
And Big B, look, I'm going to be critical of these coaches. This is the 2nd year in a row they've signed a really gifted guard who's not necessarily a point guard and decided you're the point guard. That's not how point guarding works. You can ask me to be the point guard. I am not a point guard. I will shoot the ball every time I touch it, and that's not good. So I feel like they're asking – I feel like a big reason why they had success in the first season was they had an incredible point guard who they unleashed, who they just said, go for it. Here's your restrictions. As Jerome Tang said, here's your train tracks. Don't get off of them, but eventually said, go do your thing. These guys aren't point guards. I think Doug's getting better at it, but we still see him fall down. Just I'm dribbling. Now I'm not dribbling. I turned it over. I fell down. Those things just make my mind explode.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think it goes past just the coaches. I think the men's game from top to bottom has fallen in love with positionless basketball, and that's the difference where women, it is, you're the point guard. We need you to set up the offense. And the men, they overlook that and just think anybody can do that. And that is not the case. It is just not the case. And so when you deal with positionless basketball, you just bring somebody in. Okay, they're just going to dribble up the court and pass it to somebody, and we're just going to move our offense. When in actuality, a point guard does way more than that. And Missy, I know you know that. They do way more than just dribble the ball up the court and pass to somebody. They get everybody in line. They're when the outlet pass needs to happen, they're looking for them. They can space the floor. There's just so many things that a point guard actually has to do. And when you overlook that or just think that anybody can do that, it's a problem. And I think that's kind of what K-State, and again, K-State, you could say all of NBA basketball and a lot of college basketball, they just overlook the importance of a real point guard because the stigma is, well, if you're a point guard, you can't shoot or you can't score. And that's not the case. It doesn't have to be that. I know that's how maybe in old-time basketball that maybe that, and I say old-time basketball, the 90s, heck, I'm almost 50, so that was me. But either way, it's just they think that is what it is, and it doesn't have to be that. It just means you need a leader on the court, and it's okay to say you need a leader on the court, and everybody's not built for that. I don't care if they're 5'11" or not, and that's point guard size. Everybody's just not built to be the leader, and I'm not saying that he isn't. All I'm saying is that you have to have defined roles, and you can't just make somebody the point guard leader of your team when they're not capable, maybe mentally or physically capable of doing that. You can't just force that. And I feel like a lot, and again, I'm not going to just keep it to K-State basketball, just men's basketball in general. I feel like a lot of times that they just force that, hey, we're going positionless basketball. Everybody can do everything. Well, no, everybody can't do everything just because you want them to do everything.
That's the truth. Missy, we've been talking about men's basketball for a while, and we haven't mentioned a certain name. So let's give David Gassan his flowers, in this case, tulips. That's a Dutch joke, and it was bad, but I'm sticking with it.
I got it.
Okay, I'm sticking with that Dutch joke. This guy, I love him. I love guys that play that hard, understand the best thing I can do for this team is get the damn rebound. Get the damn rebound. 17 in that loss against TCU. A double-double for him. He plays so hard. There's a couple dudes on the bench who came in to take his job, and they're not seeing the floor. That's how good David Gassan has been.
Well, I think that's great, because you have to think, then add some competition to the mix, right? Like, that's a good thing. Hold them accountable. Make you have to earn your time. Make it so that they can't take you off the floor, so that when they look down that bench and see those faces that they want to put in, they're like, I just don't have a spot for you because I can't take that guy out. 8 of the 17 rebounds at TCU were on the offensive end. You don't get those 8 possessions, there's no way K-State's in this game. I'm sorry. I just don't, because of how poorly they executed and I think shot the basketball throughout the course of the 40 minutes. But I think you're right. And I like the fact that a player like that has embraced the idea of being a role player and knowing what that is, and understanding that I have a job, and my job here is to get to the glass, to make it one and done on the defensive end. And maybe you got to go clean up a couple messes here and there for your buddies. And that's what you do as a teammate. And I go back to what Brian said about trying to figure out who's kind of in charge, and if that is a Doug McDaniel or who that is. I equate point guards like quarterbacks. You are running the show. You have to be an extension of your head coach, offensive coordinator. That's what the quarterback does. That's who they're talking to. Now in those magic little helmets, there's no magic earpieces out on the basketball floor. So you are trying to figure it out as you go. But you have to be able to have an understanding of game flow, of all the different things that you are seeing. You got to be able to identify that. And not everybody's built for that. In my own individual view, I know it's hard to throw a freshman into the mix in Big 12 play. I would have loved to see more minutes for David Castillo earlier in the year, because I think that would have been and could be, if they give him a chance. I mean, you may just have to figure this out, throw him into the fire and see if he can handle it. But I think that's much more of a traditional point guard type player for what they need right now. And maybe then you move Doug to the 2 a little bit and move him off the ball. Kind of the same conversation we were having about the women's team. You know, youngsters out front, sometimes they don't know any better and they'll just go balls to the walls and make it happen. And so is that in the mix? I think right now, guys, everything's got to be on the table, because it's not as though there's been a huge level of success in what they've been doing. Making progress, loving all of the energy, and that sense of urgency is there. But I do think that there are some players on this bench that could very well step in and help.
Do you get to use the phrase balls to the wall much in women's basketball? Because it
seems like
something that wouldn't work.
So it's kind of fun. I mean, it just doesn't happen very often. Yeah.
Cole, let's shift over to football real quick, because you're tracking the portal. You've done a lot of that for us. Where are we at with this? Because I've got a headache from it. The portal looks like right now, to me, the portal looks like a child's finger painting, but not any organization. Like, you just spilled paint and then they moved it around. That's the portal to me. It's just a big blah. Help me.
So the best way I can equate it is there is a million slips of paper with guys' names on it in an imaginary bowl. Okay. And every single school in the country is reaching in, grabbing a slip of paper. And if they're opening it up and the guy's name is on it, congratulations, you get a visit. If his name's not on it, it means somebody he's already taken and he's committed somewhere else already. They might have entered the portal 2 days ago, but you don't even, and he says he wants to visit, but then he turns around and commits, 30 minutes later. Like, seriously, guys, there are so many crazy stories of kids who have lined up visits, told coaches that they are going to go, and then 20 minutes later they sign with another school. Like, I would hate to be a football coach inside of Veneer right now. And shout out to Chris Kleiman, by the way, who is in the neighborhood of Brien Hanley in Frisco, Texas, watching North Dakota State and Montana State right now. And his son, Devin Kleiman, I haven't checked the score, it's 21-3 when we started recording this. But yeah, Fitz, to answer your question, the portal's crazy. K-State has made some strides. We are tracking some names, put out an article today. So if you'd like to know who those are, go ahead and go over to GoPowercat and check that out. But I think we're going to have some news in the next few days. Hopefully school starts on the 21st, I believe. So still about 2 weeks away from the start of the second semester, which actually plays in K-State's favor because they want the guys in by the time second semester starts. Well, if a school starts early and a kid doesn't get enrolled in time, there's a good chance that that school is then crossed off the list, and K-State, if they're next up, probably lands them.
It is interesting, Big B. K-State's using the portal a little bit different. They use it like spackle. They're going to fill in the cracks. Once in a while, you go, you got a big hole you got to fill, like at left tackle or maybe a starting receiver or a safety. But for the most part, they try to concentrate their NIL money in-house to retain talent. I like that approach for K-State football. Let's be honest, their NIL budget isn't going to win anything going up against the SEC or even some other programs probably like Texas Tech and the Big 12. They've been really wise about using the portal, but I think fans get too wrapped up in, unlike basketball, they're not trying to hit home runs for $1 million in the portal. That's not their approach.
Well, the difference is, and fans got to understand, K-State's done a good job of recruiting. So when you do a good job of recruiting and you do a good job of developing your own guys, you just want to keep and you like what you have. And that's the difference. A program like Kansas State, Iowa State, they're developmental programs. So you're not going to run out there and sign 30 guys in the transfer portal. We're not trying to turn over a roster like Colorado did. Kansas State doesn't have a roster full of guys that shouldn't be playing, Power 4 football, which is a good thing. So they don't have to go out and fill those things. And so to me, I'm excited about it, because they're bringing in guys that they think, this guy can come in right now. He can compete for a job and help us at a position of need. Not necessarily we got to have this guy right here and he's got to come in and play right away, because if he doesn't, we're going to be in trouble. That's troublesome for your program if you have a whole bunch of those. You're going to have a few of those spots. And like you said, Fitz, we're filling those. But when you've got 12 of those of the 22, that's a problem.
Yeah.
K-State doesn't have that. So you like what you have. You build from within. You still go out and sign 25, high school recruits every year. And then, then you backfill because you're going to lose anywhere between 10 and 15 people every year. That's just the nature of the beast right now. So when you backfill, that's what K-State's doing. I like the approach. There's other programs that do it differently. They know they're going to lose 20, 25 people a year, and they bring in 20 or 25 transfers every year. It makes it tough on fans because fans, and I say this in all kindness, is that fans want to get to know players. They want to get to know you and grow with you and build with you. Unfortunately, those days are over. I mean, those days are just long gone. You're not going to be able to do that. You just got to root for the name on the front of the jersey. Not that you weren't before, but it's even more important now. Just root for Kansas State, and that's it. And whoever's in there, you hope they're good, and you go from there. You're not going to get an opportunity to grow with them and know their brothers and sisters or who their parents are or any of that stuff, because they might only be here for a year. And hopefully they play good for the 1 year that they're here. Great. Okay, if you move on, great. It is what it is. But, yeah, I love the approach that K-State's taken because, again, we have to be a developmental program. We're not in Texas where you can just reach out and touch 500 Power 4 Division I kids that are within 30-minute driving distance. We're not there. So that's not the case. I love the approach that they're taking, and I think it's going to pay dividends this year.
Brian brings up a good point because somebody asked me this question. I'm sitting there watching Sunday Night Football last night, and somebody says, hey, if Will Howard gets introduced on Sunday Night Football, what college do you think he's going to say? And I had to sit there and think about that for a second. I'm like, is he going to say Ohio State? Is he going to say Kansas State? Or is he going to say Kansas State and Ohio State? And so, Brian, you're talking about that. It really does kind of reflect on where we are in college sports right now and how kids identify themselves. Are they a member of this program? Are they a member of this institution? Or do they consider themselves Yeah, I was at K-State for 4 years. I was at Ohio State for 1 year. I'm more of a Wildcat than I am a Buckeye. I don't know, but
it's weird because that's going to start coming up here in
right?
the next year or two.
Yeah.
It hasn't really cycled into the NFL game yet, but it's about to.
Right.
And so we're about to see guys being at literally 3 schools in 3 years. What do you say?
Yeah.
You know, I like the approach. Just say your elementary school. Where'd you go to elementary school? And just let us know. That's all I care about.
He's going to go with the high school, I bet.
Yeah.
Missy, the portal is a multi-purpose tool. And we're talking about the men's program at Kansas State is all in. They're going to bring in waves of talent. It hasn't been successful these last 2 years. This year still has some room to play out. We'll see what happens. Football is being more selective with the portal. They'll bring some guys in, but mostly they want to supplement with the portal, not reinvent. The women's game, I've said this for a while. I feel like if K-State really wants to go be dominant in this sport, using the NIL and the portal in women's basketball or volleyball could be an incredible tool for this program. How has Coach Mitty used those two things, the NIL and the portal, to the favor, to the improvement of women's basketball at Kansas State?
Well, I think you can look at the two young ladies that came in the portal this year. Actually, go back a couple. You think about Gabby Gregory, who came from Oklahoma and had a very successful career at Kansas State as well. I think she's one of those really good ones that now, you know, you used to be able to go get people and they transfer and you had to sit and the whole thing. That doesn't happen anymore. No. You look at Poindexter, you look at Kennedy Taylor, who's a transfer from Missouri State, who's been a backup in the post. I think both of those are a win. I think it also then is a lot like what Brian was talking about in thinking about your recruiting and how you develop that younger talent. And then can you keep that younger talent? Jeff Mitty's gone and signed a very highly regarded class to come in next year for the 24-25 or 25-26. And I can't do it yet. All of these things, the NIL, it's all part of that. You know, we are running, the train is directly headed towards July of 2025, when you have to find $20 million in all of these schools and they start divvying it out and a percentage to each sport. And the roster, we no longer have scholarships. We go to roster numbers. How are you going to manage that? So it's very different, I think, in the women's, in the landscape of maybe women's basketball. I think women's sports, what you're going to see is you're going to see things like volleyball, some of these other ones that are going to get a bump in their roster numbers, i.e. I've got more space for more bodies. Where do I go find them? Could be signing younger kids, could be diving into the junior college ranks, could be the portal. All of that is going to be in play. So I think it's the wild, wild west ultimately. Yep. And that's really what it is. I have always felt, I think we've swung the pendulum so many times. We've swung it through the COVID scenarios, and we've almost out of that cycle now, thank goodness, because you lose track of how many years that people have had and where they've been. And, you know, God only knows the 3 or 4 stops that it has been for some of these student athletes. The one pendulum I personally would love to kind of see swing somewhere back into the middle or the other direction is I would love to be able to see some parameters put on interconference transfers. Because I think that that's one of the things that is so strange that you are seeing, you know, kids from, it just doesn't matter. They're interconference, you know, a kid from Oklahoma ends up at Kansas State, or, you know, when they were in the Big 12, or take a Colorado kid that now is at Utah. And you just, all of that to me is muddy and it's weird. And I get it. Coaches are going to do it no matter your sport. You're going to take who you want, but I would love to be able to see something like that swing the other direction. And if you want to go somewhere else, but it's going to be very different than where you have been.
I agree. I think there's probably some recruiting going on in the handshake row now. Okay, let's bring this.
There was a time that you had to sit out 2 years if you transferred within conference.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and I'll give you guys an example. So before the holidays, I had the pleasure of being the sideline reporter for Alabama men's basketball at North Dakota. Okay.
Great game, by the way.
Awesome. It was fantastic. No one going in, when you looked at it on paper, Alabama at the time is the number 6 ranked team in the country. They're going to North Dakota. They're there because of Grant Nelson. It's the whole story. You just assumed it would be a 25-point game at half. North Dakota was up at half, and all on the back of a young man who's a sophomore from a small town right outside of South Dakota, Ingolstadt. He goes for 40 plus. He went for 40 points against the number 6 team in the country. And the amount of conversation, and maybe in a joking manner, about, well, I'm pretty sure Alabama will just put him on the plane if he wants to go. You know what I mean? Like, but it was for real. And the idea that this young man just torched them for 40 points, and now he's on the radar.
Yep.
Everybody knows and everybody sees. And so how much more difficult is it for the University of North Dakota and their men's basketball program at the mid-major level to be able to come up with what is going to be some probably very nice offers to this young man when it's all said and done? That's the world we're living in when you talk about the handshake, because sometimes it can be just one performance, just one game that will be the difference later on.
I'm really happy that there wasn't the portal when you were playing, Missy, because someone would have seen Jay shoot a free throw and he would have gotten portal offers from like Duke and North Carolina.
I know.
And then,
then it would just, none of this history would have been made.
Your kids wouldn't exist.
I know.
And they're awesome.
I know.
They're awesome.
I mean, thank God for just having to just be sort of normal. Let's just put it that way.
I know. We'd still be friends. I wouldn't know who the hell Jay was.
Exactly.
Cole, what does football need to do between now and late signing period, which is the first Wednesday of February? What do they need to do to call it a success?
Well, they need to add an offensive tackle. I think that is the number one thing on the wish list right now for the K-State staff. Where can they find an offensive tackle? Unfortunately for them, everybody wants to add an offensive tackle. That is an extremely high price tag, and not very many really good offensive tackles left in the portal. So they might want to add a high impact guy. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. We've seen them be in the mix with some guys, and some guys have decided to go elsewhere. I think they're probably going to end up with a guy who either A, doesn't have a ton of experience, or B, comes from a lower level program, which we've seen K-State be successful with those guys. We've also seen them hit home runs, I think, in the portal. There's some guys they've added, like Gunnar Maldonado. We talked about interconference transfers from Arizona. I think they hit a home run with a guy like that.
Exactly.
You're not going to be able to hit a home run every single time in the portal. And, I think luckily for K-State, they've been able to develop offensive linemen fairly regularly. And so if they don't get an immediate impact guy at the tackle position, they're just going to have to kind of go with it. We've seen them do that. Cooper Beebe was an underrated guy who came in as a defensive tackle and turned into should be a Ring of Honor type guy at in the next few years. And so we'll see what happens. But I think a tackle is their number one priority. Yeah. But other than that, guys, I really don't think that they desperately need anybody else. Maybe you could say a safety, maybe you could say a wide receiver, but let's just put it like this, Fitz, as we wrap this thing up. There's a kid out of Lansing, Kansas named Malik Benson who visited Kansas State, and all indications say he's probably not going to pick Kansas State. But guess what? There's no freak out in that building, because that guy would have been at best probably your second receiver. And anytime that you are missing out on a guy who's either going to go to Oregon or Tennessee, and you're not freaking out about it, should tell you how you feel about your team.
Well, I
I think that they're in a really good spot right now. And if they can add an offensive tackle, maybe an offensive guard, they're going to be just fine.
Okay. Before I get to you, Big B, I got to pop this up because Jay Heidrick says it's magical. I think he means he tricked Missy into marriage. I think that's what magical means. That's the magic. Big B, K-State men's basketball. I'm not even going to put a time frame on it, but what do they need to do to start feeling like they're making progress? Cincinnati was great. They won, but that's behind them. They've now lost. What do they need to do in the short term to start continuing to turn the ship around?
Win tomorrow. That's number one. But they have to start. I mean, I know this is something difficult to do, but you got to start making some shots. You know, it's going to be tough to win in this league if you're not going to make any shots. Look, I'm not trying to badmouth TCU, but TCU is not one of the better teams in this conference. They're just not. And if K-State is going to win some of these games, because look, for them to get back on track, they're going to have to win a couple games that nobody thinks they're supposed to win. For you to do that, you got to make shots. You're not going to Iowa State or to KU or Arizona or anywhere really and think you're going to go win and not make any shots. Some of those games you're going to have to shoot out of your mind just to be in the basketball game. So that's the thing, is that they got to start making shots. Again, that's easier said than done, but it's just the truth. You know, I mean, the game against TCU was the epitome of it. You're playing great defense, you're guarding, but you can't make anything. And then down the stretch, you let it get away from you because you can't make free throws, you can't make any shots. So I think that's what it is, Fitz. I continue to guard, continue to give the effort. But I think if you do those two things, and I think Missy could back this up, if you continue to do those two things, shots tend to start falling. It's just like Jay said, it's magical. When you give the effort and you play some defense, it's magical that shots start to fall. So I think they continue to do that, and I think things will – I don't know if they're going to turn around quickly. I just know that they'll start playing better. And I think for the fans, that's what we want, for them to just start playing better consistently.
Yeah, you know, basketball can be like a great night in Aggieville. It all comes down to quality shots. Hey, Missy, the women's team has so much ahead of itself. The women's program this season, define what makes this a really good season for the Kansas State women's basketball program.
Well, I would preface it by saying this, and I said this at the beginning of the season. I stick by it. I don't think anybody gets through the Big 12 gauntlet undefeated. There is going to be a loss or two that's going to come. Now, someone's going to win this league, might be with 2, maybe 3 losses, 4, I don't know. But it's just really tough. The way that it's set up within the women's bracket, you play the 3 games, the 3 teams home and home, 6 on the road only, 6 at home only. I think there's high expectations and big goals. Obviously, when you're picked to win the league and you don't do that, then that is going to be a letdown. So I think that would be absolutely a feather in the cap, a trophy that Jeff Mittie does not have yet. The coaches that came, Deb Patterson won 2. He doesn't have one yet. Yep. So I think a Big 12 championship, at least a regular season or a tournament championship, would be a really good way to go. And obviously you want to continue to position yourself so that you can host and be one of those top seeds and play at home for the first and second round. Then it's all about matchups after that and where this team is. I think that they have by no means have hit their ceiling, but they are going to be challenged. And this coming week at Utah, who's now ranked 22, at BYU, who's got one of the best freshman guards in Delaney Gibbs. She's from Canada originally. BYU will be a handful, especially there at home. They get great crowds, great support for women's basketball. So I think the other piece of that, Fitz, is you got to get out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament.
I agree.
I think this is you can win all the trophies, but if you don't get into that second weekend, a lot of it is for naught. So that's where I would say hang your expectations and reach high, because I think that this team has the capacity to be able to do that.
I agree. This has been a great show. Big Bean, note Andrew's comment over there. That might be a topic for Big 12 Insiders coming up, we don't have time to squeeze that in, my friend, but we will probably address it on the other channel. I appreciate you watching the K-State Insiders. Missy, you were terrific. Thank you so much. We'll have you back. Thank you for not cursing. Ryan Gilbert always says bad words.
I was given an instruction. I followed it.
That's very good. Very good. We appreciate you watching the Insiders, whether it was on X or here on YouTube. And of course, we'll have it up at GoPowercat for everyone to view later on. I'm Fitz, and we are out.
Thank you for watching the K-State Insiders. This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production.